Okay, time now for something a bit different. I think it's time I actually review a movie for a change. What do you reckon? This is another Subscribe Star requested review, and it's a bit different. It is a sci-fi movie, but it's a TV movie from the old UPN network from way back in 1998. This film is called Riddler's Moon, and it stars Kate Mulgrew, obviously best known for playing Captain Catherine Janeway from Star Trek Voyager, which of course she was making at the time of making this film. It's about a small Indiana farming community which is experiencing a major issue with some sort of blight. Nothing is growing on the farmland, and cattle die shortly after eating the grass. No one knows what's going on. The story is told from the perspective of a disabled boy named Elias, and he's friends with George, a farmer who's struggling to deal with the conditions like most of the farmers there. Elias has these odd visions of the farmland suddenly returning to growth, and he sees these peculiar stone structures growing out of the ground. He's convinced that these are premonitions, but everyone thinks that he just has an overactive imagination. Now, this film actually had a lot of script issues. It went through a lot of rewrites. Also, as an interesting fact, this was not filmed in America. Despite looking a lot like an old Midwestern town, this was actually filmed in Luxembourg. So, there you go, just an FYI. Elias's mother, Victoria, is played by Kate Mulgrew, and she's also a farmer. So, yeah, Elias confides in his mother and George about these visions that he's had, but of course, nobody takes him seriously. So yeah, it's fairly obvious at this early stage in the movie that those visions are going to be a very, very important plot point later on in the movie. But meantime, the townsfolk are still struggling, and banks are regularly foreclosing people's properties, and one farmer even takes his own life because the drought and blight has destroyed his once thriving business. Things are indeed bleak for the town. Now, as skeptical as George is of Elias's premonitions or visions, he does notice that the position of the moon isn't where it should be when viewed from the north field. Elias believes there's something about that particular field that's different. After all, his vision showed a field at full growth, and just a few days later, grass had started to grow and a cow ate from there without getting sick. He's beginning to think his visions are prophetic. They both believe that crops can now be planted in that field. As newly planted crops start growing, Elias has the vision again, and he sees strange monolith-type rocks starting to grow out of the ground, and another lunar eclipse happens. While that's happening, Elias encourages George to date Victoria, who's begun seeing a guy from the bank who's responsible for taking several farmers' properties, except Victoria's, due to his interest in her. She figures if she dates him, he won't try to take her property. Another visit to the North Field reveals it's now filled with fully grown golden crops, much to their surprise, but there's understandably a lot of jealousy from the local community who cannot understand why Victoria's crops are growing while theirs are struggling. But at least George finally summons the courage to begin dating Victoria. Two local hicks don't take too kindly to the sudden, rapid and unexplained growth in Victoria's field. And finally, at the halfway point of the film, we actually have some decent conflict. One night, they decide to wreck the crop by driving their pickup all over the field. The next day, the police are called. As frustrated as Victoria is, there's nothing the police can actually do. Resentment among the community was inevitable. She and George are demoralized, but Elias believes they shouldn't give up, that his vision and their hard work made that growth happen. But then George notices one of the buried rocks in the soil is new and different. It's volcanic. Odd indeed. Elias returns to the hill where he had the vision, and he soon passes out. He's hospitalized and in a coma, but he's stable. George does some research on the town and discovers an ancient Indian legend associated with that very field. When Elias awakens, he and George decide to dig around the volcanic rocks in the field and try to discover the mystery behind them. But while this is happening, Victoria has rejected the aggressive romantic advances of the banker dude, and he's attempting to get his revenge by taking her farm. Kind of predictable. If ever a story needed a deus ex machina to help the protagonists get out of this situation, it's right now. The local community rally around Victoria and they start digging up the stones anyway. What they discover are multiple tall stone monolith structures, just like those found in ancient historical texts about the local area. Suddenly, a solar eclipse takes place. That's convenient. Followed by the appearance of a massive alien spaceship. Finally. It fires a beam of light into the ground. Elias heads straight for it in his wheelchair. A few moments later, the ship flies off, the eclipse ends, and Elias is discovered standing beside his wheelchair. He can walk. It's a miracle. He gives a closing voiceover about how he's the only one who saw the spaceship and he never told anyone about it. Everyone else just saw an eclipse. The crops got better, the land got better, the town flourished, Victoria and George started talking about getting married, everything just got better. The story wraps up a bit too quickly in just closing exposition. Everything sort of gets resolved and the film ends on a happy note. Riddler's Moon is a pretty standard family-friendly, light and generic 90s TV movie, and it's certainly not a film that I would have reviewed if I hadn't been asked to do so by a Subscribestar supporter. It's watchable but bland enough. I will say Kate Mulgrew is the highlight of the movie. She carries the emotion, tension, heart and drama of the story on her shoulders, and her performance elevates the material considerably. I don't know what else to say about this one. Everything about it is predictable. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a, middle-of-the-road, third-gear 90s TV movie with some nice characters and a charming, if cliched, quality about it. This is very much one of those daytime, made-for-television movies. The pacing is slow, it's low budget, it's not especially ambitious, and generally unremarkable. But it does seem to have found a new audience relatively recently, actually. People who never saw it back in the day when it first aired. And there is an appreciation for wholesome, simple movies like this, especially considering this kind of stuff generally doesn't get made all that often these days. So I'm going to leave this one here. If you've seen Riddler's Moon, or maybe you remember seeing it way back in 1998 when it came out, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Dave Cullen Show channel, and remember to hit the notification bell to be notified of future updates. Hit that like button, share the video out there. Take care, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye-bye.